Every so often, I would get rather ludicrous ideas about Honkai Star Rail's lore. I've talked about how the story is an ever-repeating loop, I've claimed that the main character can change fate, and I've even adamantly believed that Elio is actually a cat. This video is going to be one of those, and it starts with Enna, the Eon of Order. I'm sure there aren't that many of you who are fully acquainted with this particular Eon. They were once a cosmic force within the universe and, much like Qlipoth, was considered to be one of its oldest. They observed the inhabitants of the universe from mortals to gods alike to ensure that the order of the universe was preserved. The story goes that due to their paths clashing with that of Harmony, Enna was inevitably assimilated. But what if I were to tell you that Enna isn't truly gone? In fact, there seems to be signs that point to their imminent return. That's what we'll be unpacking in this video, the possible return of one of the more prolific eons of Star Rail's universe. Before we explore that though, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Now before I start discussing the topic of this video, I just want to mention that there might be some references I make to the 2.1 story that can be considered to be spoilery. So if you want to absolutely avoid those, you have been warned. Also, I'll just come right out and say it. This theory is almost bordering on nonsense. The premise itself is pretty crazy, but I thought it was interesting enough to share, so just don't take this video too seriously. When Kafka first tells us the story about how the cosmic gods could die, Enna was one of the examples that she used. While it is indeed possible for an Eon to be outright killed through sheer force, there are those that have been removed from existence through less direct means. Enna, the Eon of Order, is one of the latter. The Path of Order, and by extension Enna themselves, essentially ensured that the universe was always in a state of constant order. They observed the inhabitants of the universe to ensure that order is maintained above all else. One example of their interventions when it comes to the universe is when they made a deal with Qlipoth to eradicate Tazaroth and the Swarm, due to the chaos they were causing in the universe. How two eons managed to even have a conversation, let alone agree on a deal, is beyond me, but more on that later. You might think that given order is such a fundamental part of any universe, that Enna would exist unopposed, but that's not the case. According to Kafka, as xipe ascended, the path of harmony and order inevitably overlapped in terms of function and ideology. Due to this overlap, the Aeon of Harmony was said to have forcibly absorbed the Aeon of Order. It's unclear whether this meant that Enna functionally ceased to exist, but as far as Kafka's exposition goes, the universe assumed Enna was gone, with their dominion over the path of order taken over by xipe. What's really interesting is that if you had a look at Enna's appearance, here I'll just show it to you, you'll notice that a lot of their design motifs appear quite often in Penacony. The giant eye we see appearing behind Enna's visage is oddly similar to the many different eye influences we see in Penacony. For example, on Sunday's clothes, the death meme, Sunday's servants, and even the dream seller giant eyeball thing has an uncanny resemblance to the eye floating behind Enna. Then you have the faction that used to follow Enna and the Path of Order, who were referred to as the Beyond the Sky Choir. A faction referred to as a choir is strikingly similar to some members of the family who are said to constantly sing the praises of xipe throughout the universe. Perhaps they got integrated into the Iris family when the paths merged, but it seems too odd of a coincidence. On top of that, while the family and its denizens claim they are living harmoniously, just look at the internal politics they engage with. It clearly shows they are an organization ruled through an iron fist rather than harmonious understanding. So much so that you might even say they value order instead of harmony. I mean, they have a policing force that ensures rules are followed, their leadership spies on practically everyone, even their own members, to ensure loyalty, and they even have abilities that can compel you to tell the truth. It doesn't seem like they are living harmoniously at all, at least in the traditional sense of harmony, but rather exercise a kind of order that is being forcibly enforced. So it does seem that despite being absorbed, imagery and ideologies that would typically be associated with Enna seems to appear rather often amongst the followers of harmony. Now, of course, given the fact that Enna was absorbed, this isn't necessarily a surprise, but xipe themselves appear largely different from these themes that I mentioned. Xipe's design motif, for one, gravitates around puzzle pieces and rainbow-esque light, which we do see appear in Penacony as well, such as the environmental puzzles we have to do, and when Sunday uses his ability to compel Aventurine. So then why is it that if Enna was indeed absorbed and technically doesn't exist anymore, that Penacony doesn't appear more like xipe, and instead you have remnants of Enna's imagery? This is when I'm going to go right off the cliff and propose a rather radical idea. When an eon gets absorbed or assimilated, they don't necessarily get destroyed. Instead, they are suppressed in some way within either the assimilating eon or their domain. I think of it like the souls that Father absorbed in Full Metal Alchemist. Their bodies might have disappeared, but each individual functionally still exists. And when Father loses his control over his own body, these souls are able to take effect by asserting their individual personalities. I think that this very thing is happening, and as Penacony becomes more chaotic or disorderly, it becomes less harmonious, and the more this happens, the stronger the need for order to exist. It's sort of like xipe not being able to hold Enna down. There is plenty of evidence as well that shows that Penacony is becoming increasingly more chaotic, and that it's being intentionally done. You have Sparkle, who has been clearly orchestrating something in the background and has gone so far as to even give Aventurine a giant red button that supposedly is a detonation trigger for a huge bomb. Then you have the Enigmata, who has now officially appeared in the story through Gallagher, who no doubt is planning to make things even more confusing and chaotic. And even the Nameless, who are trying to unearth the Watchmaker's legacy, which will undoubtedly cause an uproar if ever revealed. Not to mention the IPC, Acheron, the Garden of Recollection, the Stellaron Hunters, and even the remnants of Penacony's prisoners, who are made up of the Omen Vanguards, history fiction knowledges, and who knows what other faction. It just seems like chaos is pretty much on the menu as far as Penacony is concerned. So if Enna does still exist somewhere within xipe, the unbridled bed of chaos Penacony is about to become is likely going to be a strong enough catalyst to push for their return. Also, it seems odd that the eye floating behind Enna is eerily similar to the eyes of the Afghan, and we've been getting a lot of exposition about the Gayatha Tricorps, but that's probably just a coincidence. Now, since I've clearly gone off the deep end, I'm going to include one more angle to this already convoluted theory. Remember earlier I mentioned that Enna had somehow made a deal with Qlipoth? Well, the deal was for Enna to destroy Qlipoth's natural enemy, which was the Eon Ouroboros, in exchange for Qlipoth's help in destroying Enna's natural enemy, Tazaronth and the Swarm. This is also another example of how chaos and order are almost opposites of each other, and how the more chaotic a situation becomes, like what the Swarm caused, the more order is needed. But back to what I was saying. Long story short, Qlipoth held up their end of the bargain, and why we see very little of the Swarm. But before Enna could keep theirs, they were absorbed by xipe. So what has this got to do with anything? Well, the members of the IPC that are on Penacony aren't just any old members. 3 of them who are involved, namely Aventurine, Topaz, and Jade, are all members of the 10 Stonehearts. They go by another name though, the non-performing asset liquidation specialist. Topaz is an expert debt collector, Jade is an expert in credit, and Aventurine is a bond tactician and strategist. Up till this point, we've been led to believe that they are here for Penacony, to functionally take back the planet and recoup the IPC's investment. But you have to remember that while the IPC do want to make a profit, they are at the end of the day doing everything for the Ember Lord. So what if the planet is just a side mission? Their true mission is to force Enna to pay the debt they owe to Qlipoth in one way or another. Everything they are doing is to ensure Enna returns to this world so Qlipoth can have them do whatever they promised. Yes, this is an absolutely convoluted and nonsensical theory. I can hear all of you collectively going crazy and yelling at your screens. At first, I thought this was too dumb to include here, but the more I thought about it, the more the pieces fit. I mean, the audacity to think they could collect a debt from an eon that, as far as the universe is concerned, is already dead, seems to be right up the alley for these 10 nutjobs. I don't think this is what will happen, but in the off chance that this is really the IPC's true goals, I thought to still talk about it. It puts the IPC at a much higher position on my personal list of factions, even if they are the quintessential image of corporate greed. Now, crazy rambles aside, there are circumstances that could derail both these theories. The first is that the whole idea of Anna returning relies heavily on the idea that if enough chaos were to exist, then the path of order would naturally have to exist as well. The issue is that it might not be necessarily true, especially since Ho-Oh and the path of equilibrium exists. You see, in Gold and Gears, we learned that the moment Anna was absorbed, it was Ho-Oh that actually stepped in to ensure order was still instituted. They likely did this to ensure balance was maintained. So perhaps if Penacony becomes extremely chaotic, the Eon of Equilibrium would be the great equalizer and not Anna, therefore preventing the need for her return. We also don't fully know how this assimilation of Eons really work. Perhaps Anna really has disappeared and they are never coming back. The imagery of Anna that appears on Penacony may really just be xipe, given they did indeed absorb the Eon of Order, so maybe they just aren't similar to the example I gave of Full Metal Alchemist. Aside from that, there are quite a number of other players and factions on Penacony as I've mentioned, and they may have no interest in bringing Anna back. So it's very likely that things won't go as crazy as what I've concocted here, and likely there won't be such nonsensical twists in Penacony's storyline. But I will say this, if this turns out to somehow be true, then the entire world of Star Rail will be turned on its head, as the implication is that Eons can now actually return. This opens up a lot of interesting possibilities. But again, all this is just my ramblings on a theory I thought would be fun if it ever came true, so I urge all of you to take it as it is, nothing more than speculation. I'll end the video here. If you have an even crazier idea, do share them in the comments below. If you had fun watching me ramble about nonsense, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching till the end, and as usual, have a nice day.